Committee meeting. We'll keep it very short. I'm sure you all want to go home. Per your request at the last meeting, we're going to have one of these meetings the Monday before every council meeting, with a few exceptions. And the meetings will be at 5:30. Today, the meeting got delayed because I want every meeting to be taped and available on the TV channel, so people can actually watch it without having to come here. So some of you, I think it was Councilman O'Connell, had asked that we invite Mr. Rooker to come to talk to us about some of the data they have. So is Mr. Rooker here? I think I saw him, yeah. Would you like to come to the front, or you want to speak from over there? Thank you, Mr. Rooker. You want to sit over here? Okay. It's okay. So we gave him a very short notice, and so what I would like you to do is to ask him what information you want him to provide for the next meeting. Basically, what Mr. O'Connell wanted, Councilman O'Connell wanted, was some data, but it wasn't specific, so I couldn't send it to you before, so I apologize about it. So I have Mr. Mendez. If you guys want to sit down. Mr. Mendez is on the queue. Councilman Mendez, sorry.
I'm actually kind of glad that I don't have to see the whole presentation again.
You've got it memorized, I know by now.
One set of information that I think would be useful for us is I know I've seen some slides that you have when you've made presentations to other community groups about the pace of home sale prices going up just since the last assessment 2 years ago, and some information about that countywide I think would be useful for us.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be happy to provide. We've done a good bit of research, and obviously have a lot of data, and we've been trying to share that with council members, so this may be a great forum for us to actually come and just share that information to everybody at one time. And specifically, I think we were going to talk a little bit about tax relief and tax freeze. We have some concerns about those programs too, with at least I do, and this is, Mr. Cardwell wasn't able to make it. We had late notice on this, as the councilman said, but the tax freeze program is one that's interesting, because you have to freeze your taxes in the year, obviously if you're going to have a reappraisal in 2017, just to get to the point, we want to make sure that we get the notice out early to folks so they can get their 2016 taxes frozen before the 17 reappraisal takes effect. So there's just some things that we want to reach out to you about as well.
Thanks very much.
Councilman O'Connell?
And to that end, and I don't know where you all were thinking of going with the presentation, but I think this committee might very well, and I'm not on it, so I appreciate the chair offering me the opportunity to participate. I think this committee is a valuable resource for consideration of affordable housing in a variety of forms, and I think the planning director spoke to that at this committee's last meeting. As you all look at it, can you give us a sense of participation rates, what the process, if I'm an individual homeowner looking to take advantage either of a property tax freeze or one of the relief programs, what does that actually look like in terms of how it plays out for an individual taxpayer? And you know, if this body were to be able to participate in some way in making those programs either increase the awareness, increase the participation rates, or look at structural changes to those, what the options are here.
I'm named Tony Grigsby. I work for the trustee. The tax relief program has been going on since 1977. Tax freeze 2007. It's fairly simple with tax relief. In most cases, you either have to be disabled through Social Security, or you have to be over the age of 65 to participate in tax relief. It's also the same in tax-frees. You have to be over the age of 65. There are income limits associated with both programs. Tax relief is, for this year, it's $28,690. That's including Social Security. And for tax-frees, it's $40,960. If you're on tax relief and you're elderly, you're automatically in tax-freeze. You automatically get your taxes frozen. Like Mr. Rooker says, yes, that's going to make an impact in 2017, and we need everybody to actually, as many as we can, to get their taxes frozen before 2016.
So can you repeat that? You are automatically enrolled if you are over a certain age and...
Yeah, if you're on tax relief, you're over the age of 65, you're automatically enrolled in tax freeze if you're elderly.
Thank you. Councilman Sledge?
To follow up on Councilman O'Connell's comments, is there a way, I know we were talking about the potential for how people would enroll or how they would be enrolled. From your offices, is there a way to tell from our districts who potentially would be eligible based on age? I don't know that you have income data, but sort of folks, so that we have a starting point basically to say if we want to be able to reach out to our constituents.
This year, we actually have changed software systems. In this software system, we should be able to tell specifics of where there are more tax relief recipients in a specific zip code or maybe a district that may help the council in making that determination. I should be able to get you some information in the next week or so if you need it.
Do you keep age data on payees where we could see just the seniors who may or may not qualify in our district?
Age data for recipients already on the program, yes, we have their birth dates. Anything prior to that, no.
Thank you. Councilman Coleman?
Thank you. I had a question concerning the age limit on your tax bracket. I remember when I was on the council a couple of years ago, we'd talked about the age going back to 60 as opposed to 65. Is 65 a federal mandate? Or is that an age that we select statewide, or local?
Well, in tax relief, it's actually statewide. That is the age that the state actually requires to be on tax relief. Now, again, if you're disabled, you can be younger than that, but you got to be disabled through Social Security to get on.
Right, and your income has to be at a certain level as well.
That is a true statement.
So you have to match it up.
Yes, sir.
And if in fact we were talking about reducing the age, that would be something that we would make application to the state.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And my second question is, do you have to apply every so often, or do you roll off? I know a lady that said that she was on it and she was no longer on it. I didn't understand why.
Tax relief, you actually, when you apply,
Yes.
no, the only reason why you'd roll off, there's two reasons, is your income level would actually go up, and that's, in most cases, that doesn't really happen because it actually, your income level increase goes up by the Social Security increase. Mm-hmm. The only thing that would actually cause that to happen is if money you got from some other source that actually would increase your income, that would actually get you off that program. The only other way is, they have to actually fill out a document every year and sign it. If they do not do that, then they could be taken off the program.
Mr. Rooker, I have a question for you as it relates to the assessment. Now, the assessment is going to take place in 2017. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at this point in time, do you have an idea of, I guess, what we would call a rate increase? Or can you project, because as we begin to study, our income and retirement and places we want to go, and a lot of our neighbors are going to equate this to a property tax increase, which that question is bound to come up at some point in time. And the hardest thing is for them to distinguish this property tax assessment as opposed to property tax increase.
Absolutely. That is always very confusing, and I think that in 2017, with this particular reappraisal program, we're going to see historic increases in value, and I think we're going to see a bigger shift in the tax burden than we've ever seen before in the history of reappraisal programs for Davidson County. And this is simply because there are certain areas of Davidson County where value increases are just so high that, and everybody across the county is doing well. And this is something that we can bring in and show you in more detail on a district by district basis. But we have 35 council districts. All 35 council districts have gone up in value. The council district that's gone up the least in value over the last few years has actually gone up about 5%, over 5%, which is pretty good in a normal market. But there are some council districts, just on average, where we're seeing value increases of 30% or greater as of today. And that's only been 2.5 years. So we've got another year and a half to go. So I don't know exactly what the market's going to do over the course of the next year and a half, but I anticipate we're going to see some property values that are going to go up on average in some council districts by maybe 35-40%, which is huge. And then there are isolated areas even within the county that are going to have increases that are going to be greater than that. Specifically, say downtown commercial property values could go up considerably more than that. They could, in some cases, double. We're seeing sales of properties right now that are actually double the amount that we have them appraised for, and our appraisal was done just 2.5 years ago. So, those are going to create some shifts, and that's what the reappraisal is designed to do, is to reset the tax base where it's fair for everybody, and they're paying based on their current value. But there are going to be winners and losers, and we're going to see some council districts, if we look at it on a council district by district basis, there are going to be probably around 12 or 13 districts that are going to see increases in their taxes just because of the reappraisal. That's not taking any kind of tax rate increase into consideration. And you're going to have the rest of the districts, 22 or 23 districts, are actually going to see a decrease in their taxes as a result of the reappraisal, because their values haven't gone up as much as average. As you know, you've been through this many times. If your value goes up more than average for the county, you're going to see an increase in taxes. If it comes up at a less than average increase, you're going to see a decrease at that certified tax rate, which is revenue neutral. Right. So these are the kind of things that we want to share with you in advance, so you can consider them when you're making decisions here in this body.
And you're coming back with a presentation. So if you all want to hold on to your questions when he comes back, some of the questions may be answered by his presentation. I also wanted you to have a chance to speak to the mayor staff that is waiting in the back, and also I wanted to get any update from Kerry. So try to keep your questions brief, please. Thank you. I know you all want to go home. It's been a long day. Yes, Mr. Hastings, Councilman Hastings.
Yes, Mr. Rooker. Question for you. I was saying 28,000 per person. Excuse me. Is that per person for tax freeze, or is that for household?
That's really a trustee question.
Yeah. It's actually a household. If it's husband and wife, it's actually a household. Yes.
All right. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Council Lady Johnson, Karen Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Bedney. This is a question for the trustee as well. You had just mentioned to Councilman O'Connell that seniors who are in a particular program, I didn't catch that, were automatically placed in was it a tax freeze program?
Yes, ma'am.
What program?
If you're on tax relief, and that's a state-assisted program that actually the trustees in each county actually implement, you're automatically, if you're elderly, you're automatically put in tax freeze, because your income level is actually lower than the tax freeze base. So you're automatically put in. You don't have to. You fill out one application; it takes care of both.
Okay, so those who are already in the tax relief program are automatically put in the tax freeze program. How are they made aware of that?
Well, when we send the bills out every year, there's actually a brochure that's actually in the tax notice that actually explains the tax relief program. If they're not on the program, if they already own the program, they actually get a tax relief document that actually they fill out, put their income on, sign it, and send it back in every year. But, and then they get a brochure in there as well, where if they want to pass it on to someone else, you know, a family member or something, where they can actually get them on the tax relief program as well. But all the bills that we send out have a tax relief trifold in it explaining both programs.
So if they do not fill out that form and sign it and send it back, are they then subsequently taken off?
Yes, ma'am, they are. We do make a special effort because we understand that these are senior citizens that they sometimes have an issue remembering, because we send them out in October and they have until April of the next year to send it in, that we make especially at the end of that season, we try to call them and make some sort of contact with them. But in some cases, we do lose some just because we can't get a hold of them.
Do you have a report by district of those that end up dropping off because of the lack of the signature? And two, is there any way to give the council members in their districts, those folks who are going to be within that year time frame, I guess who are needing to have that signature
Yes,
submitted? Well, I'm concerned.
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
I am, because I had a constituent that had some very complex, challenging issues to get his access ride renewed, and it really came down to he had to go to his doctor, then he had to go down and get the paperwork filled out, etc. And he physically was unable to do that, so we had to do a lot to assist him to get him back on that program.
Right.
And so there are a lot of seniors out there that may have barriers or some challenges that may result in them not being able to fill out this form and get it back with their signature. And I want them to have every opportunity to be able to have that form returned.
Yes, ma'am. And really, the only thing we really need is the signature. If we can get the signature on that document, we can call them on the phone and get everything else, because we really don't need any documentation. After they're on the program, we don't need any documentation actually saying this is how much they draw. All we need is that signature. If we get that signature, pretty much we can do everything else over the phone. Yes.
So if you could do that for us, I think that would help us to help our constituents, because my concern is the number of people who are dropping off due to the lack of the signature.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to thank you now and invite Eric Cole to come to the podium. Thank you very much for stopping by, and we'll send you some more questions. All right. Thank you, Mr. Rooker. Thank you. So we have Eric Cole in the podium there. Would you mind introducing yourself and your staff? I see you're...
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for taking the time. I'll just be really brief. I'm Eric Cole. I know most of you sat in your seat for 8 years, and admire you all for what you do. So we're the Office of Economic Empowerment and Economic Opportunity and Empowerment. You can call us OEOE, and sing a song if you'd like to. We have 4 staff people, myself, Adrian Harris, who I think many of you know, who you're going to want to spend most of your time with related to the issues of this committee. Adrian's a recognized expert in affordable housing policy, worked in a number of the different agencies that work on affordable housing in the community. We're very, very fortunate in the mayor's office to have Adrian as a senior advisor. Ashford Hughes, who's not with us today, but who is our workforce and labor liaison. I know a number of you know Ashford. And then Ann Havard, who is on our staff as a policy assistant as well. We're a resource to you all as we are a resource to the mayor on issues of economic opportunity, helping folks build pathways out of poverty, and then working on the affordable housing issue as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. And they will be the ones implementing the legislation we approve here in the council. So we appreciate you coming by, and if you all want the mayor's office to come and talk to us about their vision or whatever else you want to ask them, they already told me they are available to come, and I reached out to them based on comments that were made at the last meeting. I wanted to make sure that they were included. Thank you very much, and thank you all staff for staying this long.
Yeah, we're happy to hear from you all as we go forward. Let us know what you're seeing and what's going on in your districts. Thanks.
Do anybody has any questions for Eric right now, or do you want to wait till he comes back? Sam? Coleman? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Mr. Coleman, sorry. And I wanted to ask Kerry, the process already started, as you all know, the planning department, and there had been several presentations that they have made. I attended some of them, and I've seen some of you at those meetings. I just wanted Kerry to be able to share with the people watching on TV and all of you where we are, give us an update on that. I just don't know how to turn that microphone. Does that work?
Yes.
All right. Take it away.
For those of you who were at the stakeholder group meeting last night, this will be a little bit repetitive, but last week we had 3 meetings open to the public. The first was the stakeholders group meeting, where the consultants came and spoke with the stakeholders group. We had a public meeting on Wednesday of last week where he gave a shortened version of his presentation along with a community engagement exercise. And then on Thursday, we had the Planning Commission work session where they were able to engage with the consultant and some questions. We're working with ITS right now to get the video up for all of those meetings. The slides are up right now for the stakeholder group meeting and the public meeting, along with a report of the public input that we received. Everything that we're getting through this process is on the planning department's website. There's a special heading for the inclusionary housing process, so you and all of your constituents can find our information there. We're now working with the consultants to schedule the third and final visit with the stakeholders group, and they are working on a feasibility study right now. So they take various data points, including triggers, AMI, incentives, and put them into a feasibility model and report back to us on what kind of approaches will be feasible in Nashville's market.
Thank you. Any questions for Kerry? Councilman Mendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Logan, I just wanted to share that from my perspective, having attended the 2 stakeholder meetings, that it feels to me, and I think in a growing feeling in some parts of the community, that the process with the consultant is not maybe as open-minded as it should be. To me, it feels like the way some of the data is being presented, that perhaps the department has pre-decided what its conclusions are going to be. And I'm not saying that the department has. I'm saying that the way the information is being presented is leading to that feeling. And at a minimum, I think there's a communications problem around that. And the 2 things in particular that I would point to is that this notion of, I think he uses the term central county, which he doesn't define. I don't know what it means. It's not a term that people in Nashville use, but it seems, at least from a communications perspective, that the groundwork is being laid to limit some affordable housing solutions or all affordable housing solutions to whatever the central county is in his mind. And I think that is at a minimum a communications problem. And then the second one is the notion of the rent control statute. And I'm here to be a representative of the people, not to wear my lawyer hat. But I've read the Colorado rent control statute. I've read the Tennessee rent control statute. I've read the Boulder inclusionary zoning ordinance. It would be a more fair statement, in my opinion, to say there is a workaround that one city has done. It's highly complicated. Here are the pros and cons of trying to try it in Nashville, rather than just making the policy conclusion, that's not going to work, and we shouldn't consider it. I think that's not his job. And I think it's things like that that are leading to at least the perception that the conclusions are pre-baked. And I would urge the department and the consultant to work on that communications perception.
Would you like me to respond?
Yes, although at the end I'm going to say there's still a perception of a communications problem.
And I hear you on that. I wanted to confirm for everyone that we are still going through the feasibility models, and there has been no conclusion determined. So, and that's mostly what I wanted to say in response to that. The state rent control statute is potentially a limitation, and we are working with them not only to get more information on Colorado's statute, but also the program and how it works in Colorado. There's been an amendment to the state rent control statute in 2010 that let them have an exception for affordable housing entities, and so we are getting more information on that, and I just wanted to make sure that I let you know that as well.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilman Sledge?
Yeah, thanks for being here, and thank you, Chair. I had a couple quick questions, one of which pertained to just the scope. If you could just give a quick summary of the scope of work that the consultant's been asked to do based on the RFP and based on the bill that was passed, just so our committee is just reminded of what they're looking at right now.
Sure. The shortest way I could describe it is to determine what types of inclusionary housing policies are feasible in Nashville's market. Is the quickest summary I can give. We've asked them to keep their options open and to look at various programs and different ways to approach various policies to create the largest number of meaningful, affordable, and workforce housing units as possible.
And based on that, I know we focused a lot, and we have focused a lot on the inclusionary zoning portion of that. In the most recent presentation that was given, there were some other options that were discussed. They were kind of put toward the end. In what you're hearing from the consultant, what would you say that we can anticipate going forward about how much those other, and I'll just throw one out there, which is community land trust, how much those other options might be explored when we're going through that scope?
To our earlier point, I don't know now what types of programs will come out in their recommendations, but we are asking them not to limit it solely to the question of mandatory or voluntary inclusionary zoning.
And this is just last one. To Councilman Mendez's point about public perception and engagement, is there either within the RFP or the intention of the department to provide some sort of regular update on public engagement, whether that's numbers, amount of meetings held, where they've been held? Is there any sort of regular updating that the department foresees?
Sure. The consultant's RFP included having 3 meetings with a stakeholder group of at least 20, and the stakeholder group for this particular study it's a 50-member stakeholder group, and so that group has been and will be engaged regularly throughout the process. We've also had the public meeting, and we're working now on turning the same kind of exercise into an electronic survey, and we are posting everything, not just the number of meetings, but the content from the meetings as far as slides or videos or reports from the public input on the planning department's website, so that the substantive content is available.
Thank you. I have Councilman Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you leading up, and thank you, Carrie, one of my favorite planners in the planning department. I have just 2 questions. I was not able to attend the last meeting, but I did attend the one before there. Full disclosure, did have another meeting going on at the same time. But I wanted to see from the first meeting, it seemed like there were some questions about the people being in the AMI of 45,000 and us trying to fulfill that housing versus those that may be in a lower bracket. Where are we with that in terms of trying to fulfill the housing?
So the way different percentages of AMIs are addressed through any ordinance is still being looked at through the feasibility model. And we talked a little bit about the different AMI levels, but as far as recommendations, that's part of what we'll talk about at the next meeting.
So still open. Okay, and then the second piece is, what are we doing in terms of looking at or exploring incentives? And I'm talking about if we're going to tell, or if we're to say that developers, or not even developers, but people who own land, that you have to build a certain amount, what are we doing as a city to say, okay, we're telling you to do this, but in return, we're giving you, and so where are we with the study on that?
Sure. And that's one of the things that he'll look at in the incentive or in the feasibility model is what kind of incentives will work for different types of developments. He has been in contact with a number of developers over the past month or so, talking to them about their costs and hard costs and soft costs for construction and management of various types of developments so that he can use that real data for the feasibility model. And then we're also going through an in-depth review of our zoning code to see what kind of things right now are being incentivized that need to be either taken out as incentives or calibrated differently so that affordable and workforce housing becomes the main incentive.
Okay, good deal. And then I know that MDHA identified land that they owned to let nonprofits that specialize in affordable housing develop. Have we, as a city, is it a way to look at that differently, or is all the land that they explored the land that we have, period, for affordability? How does that fit into this?
I think that's a program that the Barnes Fund is doing with back tax properties. And so they are working on their second round of applications, and I'll defer to Eric on details, but they're working on the second round of applications, getting those through the process, being able to grant the property, donate the property to the nonprofit is an authority that we got through the state legislature last year. And they're on their second, I think, Eric.
So we're going to keep those.
Council lady, but sorry to interrupt, but MDHA is here.
Okay.
They own some property that is not, I mean, it's a separate thing, so he'll be speaking about it later.
And I just wanted to see, are we going to keep it separate? Are we, in addition to that, I guess the question was leading into, would we as a city, aside from MDHA, try to identify more land that we own as a city to develop affordable housing? That was the second piece.
That's a great question.
To the question.
Yeah.
Do you want?
Oh. There.
Yeah, so Carrie did a really nice job of framing it up, but basically for the Barnes Round 2, which is in the process of being finalized right now, we did identify, working with Metro Property, some back tax lots basically that were on the books that did not, we were able to basically hold them off from going through the normal disposal process through eBid. So there were 18 lots that were identified for this round 2 of Barnes funding. So we've only ever given dollars before. This time we made 18 lots available also for application to nonprofit affordable housing developers. And we're finalizing that process right now with the Metro-owned properties. We do have additional Metro-owned properties that one of our jobs, frankly, right now is looking at and talking about what a process might look like going forward to put those properties out for possible affordable housing development as well. But that's still in process. Now, MDHA has some of its own properties that it also, I believe Mr. Harbison can speak to that far more eloquently than I can, but they also put some lots out from their surplus property along with their home dollar process, which is goes alongside the Barnes process.
Eric, just to clarify, sorry. And the other city departments also own property, right? Like the fire department and the healthcare department, and I mean, all the sheriff owns property.
So yes, and on the Metro side, that goes through a process called mandatory referral, and the planning department, and I mean, each one of those departments basically has a chance to take a look at that property. But yeah, within what finance, real property services manages, those are the Metro owned parcels, but they are separate than MDHA. But some of them could be fire department, some of them could be, I think even schools falls into our the metro world, Carrie's nodding, so that's a good thing. But yeah, the other metro departments are a part of the metro world of properties as well. Some are really not developable or buildable. They're very small scraps and different things. And so one of the things we're looking at is what kind of a process can we do to evaluate those and then do a, fair, transparent, equitable way to get them into the affordable housing mix.
Okay, yeah, that was definitely getting at the heart of the question. I appreciate you clarifying that. The only piece that I need more clarity on is how does that fit in? Are we trying to keep that separate from the process that we're going through now to determine affordability and how to make it accessible? Or
No, I would see them as very similar. I mean, the Nashville Next recommendations sync up with what planning is working on. I mean, we're involved as stakeholders in the stakeholder committee. I would definitely see this as a multi-pronged strategy. Regardless of what you all do around inclusionary housing or inclusionary zoning, I think we have to have a multi-pronged strategy, and those properties are a key element of that going into the future.
Okay, and they could be
and Mayor
looked at
agrees, so.
for a repurpose aside from what MDHA is already doing. Yep.
In conjunction with, I think I would say.
Okay, yep, okay, that was my question.
Thank you.
I did get a lot of
Thank you,
clarity.
Councilmember.
Thank you.
I think next will be Councilman Mendez. You still have a question? No? Sorry. Okay. So the next will be, I think, Councilman Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I know it's late and we need to go. Ms. Logan, are we still on the track of a certain percentage of development? Are we trying to identify in our, our plans going forward, a certain percentage that must be set aside in each development that's planned?
That is what the consultant is testing right now. So right now, we don't know the answer of what will work in Nashville's market, and he's doing various models on an incentive-based at different kinds of construction. For example, two-story townhome construction is different than four-story multifamily construction is different than 15-story multifamily construction, and what those numbers mean. But the shortest answer is that no options are off the table at this point.
Okay, so at this point in time, we're not at the point of saying 12% of a development, 10% of a development would be set aside for affordable homes. That's not where we are.
Not yet.
But in the end, when we get the legislation late in January, we can be assured that some number will be identified. Is that correct?
Yes, along with different parameters to the program. So what kind of trigger points? Does it apply to a 10-unit development or a 20-unit development? Does it apply in different ways when you're on transit? I mean, there are a lot of factors that could go into a program that would be recommended in January.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carrie, one of the things that I'm kind of betwixt about here is that we are using, especially with the consultant, word of affordable housing and also workforce housing. I know that the percentage of the AMI is different there, but are we doing two different plans, or are we just doing one for just affordable housing, which is the 80%, and we're leaving out the other? I want a better understanding of that.
It's both, but the impact may be different depending on the AMI level that you're addressing. So frequently, when you are addressing a lower AMI level, you have fewer of those units that you need to provide versus if you have a higher AMI level, so the rents are then higher, then there may be more of those in that case. So it's both, but how the AMI affects the requirement is what they are going to determine.
All right, so we're basically back to what the other council has asked, basically the numbers. So the AMI level that's below the 80 percentile, right now we really don't know how we're going to fit that in. Is that correct?
Yeah. Right now, the feasibility modeling is what they're looking at for both AMI ranges.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think and I see this question come up again and again, I think we could have come up with a fixed legislation, and we decided instead to ask them to do this research and study, and that's why it's hard for them to answer a question when we are telling them do all this research. The last person on the queue is Councilman Sledge.
This question might be better suited to somebody in the mayor's office. We're talking a lot about the potential impact of current state code and potential state level legislation. I'm trying to get an idea of if there are conversations being had right now with state leadership, whether from Davidson County or otherwise, about possibilities, potential of, what could fit, what could not fit. Is that line of dialogue open right now is what I'm asking.
Mr. Cole is nodding. I don't know. Are you coming? He's trying to think of an answer.
Hi, Jim Harbison, MDHA. First of all, Eric and I and their team, we all had lunch together. So our goal is to be right like this for the future. Second, I speak with THDA, Ralph Perry, weekly, sometimes daily. There are some concerns he's voiced about a Republican legislature's approach to some of our somewhat democratic ideas in terms of politics, and there is some concern about potential interpretation of rent control. I'll leave it at that. Nothing specific. That's at the housing agency level. It doesn't impact our programs or our relationship with them, and they've been very supportive of our building program as we're putting more affordable housing out there. So does that address your question on what that's? So we have that state agency coordination going on actively, routinely, all the time.
On an agency level, yes. On a legislative level, I'm trying to see if there's been those sorts of conversations.
No, I mean, I think the example was used earlier about the property question and the fact that we went to the state legislature last session and were able to get that approved. I think that's as much of a timeline issue for all of us, and certainly as we look at the legislative package that the mayor sends up, we'll be looking at all of those options that what we need to put in and what we need to work through related to that legislation. So, and what we want to put forward in a package, for early January. So that conversation started. Obviously, we're still staffing up, and a lot is happening on our end, but we're certainly watching these developments, and we'll have the right sort of policy perspective, but it's also got to be based on what you all want to do and what comes out of the planning study. So,
and I have, sure.
I'll add on one thing. You may recall that last year we had a low-income housing tax credit challenge. Mayor Dean and this council approved a low-income housing tax credit payment in lieu of taxes. We'll have the first one of those to bring to you probably within a month. We've got 2 applications we're doing the staff work on now. But that led to legislation last year, and there is a small amount of follow-on legislation this year just to make it more clear that we're absolutely within state guidelines. So there is some legislation going on. It's related to our low-income housing tax credit pilot that you've already passed and that we're executing now. We'll be bringing up first one of those proposals, I think, as early as December, but won't be later in January.
Great. And I have full faith in MDHA and the mayor's staff. The point that I do want to make to this body and the larger body is the filing deadline on the state level will likely come, from what I've been hearing, before potentially we receive this legislation. So I think that we have to take that into consideration.
Thank you. Carrie?
I was just going to add to that last portion that our timeline is such that we need to have a program drafted by basically January 1st in order to have it to the Planning Commission on the 14th. So from our perspective, we need to operate within the parameters that we have at the moment.
So let's see if we can get out of here by 7. I'll give Council Lady Gilmore a last question, and then I have a comment to make, and then we can wrap it up if you all are okay with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're the best. And I feel like we're going to get this solved with your leadership, with MDHA, Eric Cole, Carrie, Doug, everybody that's on the committee. I feel like we can get it done. This is my last question. I don't know if we've discussed how the housing would be scattered. Is it going to be across the city? I do wonder with some of the down zoning that we've done in some areas and some of the price points that are in some neighborhoods, that when we talk about affordability, even if we talk about it 80%, it still will not be or how do we make it representative where everybody gets a share of it across the city, because each person is different, especially when we're talking about 80%. But because of down zoning and the price point, I'm concerned there's only going to be in one area.
One of the data points that the consultant is looking at is where there is a need for more affordable housing. And the goal of any policy would be to have it spread throughout the county in a meaningful way so that it's close to transit. Again, some of that question is going through the feasibility model right now, and so it's difficult to say whether there would be a mandatory countywide solution that comes out of the feasibility model or a more targeted approach.
Can I pile on with one point? There isn't a fair housing, there's affordable fair housing, AFFR, affirmatively furthering fair housing rule that's just come out of HUD that mandates and somewhat restrictive about increasing poverty density in housing. It's based off a recent court ruling out of Dallas. So some of this will be scrutinized pretty heavily by HUD on any new construction. And I'll just make one last advertisement. We'll always have a rep here for your meetings. I'm trying to make it me, but if it's not me, it'll be at least one of my directors or my deputy or my general counsel to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Yes.
Just one follow-up question. I guess the concern I would have if we did it by, if we're saying people make $40,000 to $50,000, and we're saying we're looking only towards transit, I don't think that all those people would need transit, if that makes sense. It wouldn't have to be. I mean, transit is good. I don't want to sound like I'm speaking back, but if they're 40 to 50,000, I don't think everybody would have to be close to transit, if that makes.
I should clarify and say that that's just one of the factors that could go into a program. That could not be a factor. Proximity to jobs could be a factor. There are lots of things that could be a factor in the placement of or the encouragement of affordable workforce housing.
So, Carrie, clearly there is a need for more information. Would you mind for the next meeting to expand a little bit on all those different variables? I mean, I know that you don't want to be very specific because the report is not done, but to the extent that you can do that, I think that might help understand what the legislation is asking you all to do.
I'd be happy to talk about that with you, yes.
Thank you. So, all right. I think it's 7. Thank you all for staying. And Eric and Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming. If you could share with us for the next meeting, what efforts are we doing to have some of the properties that are owned by Metro, for those properties to be, even if we sell them, that the selling of the property somehow has some kind of an easement or some kind of restriction to keep some affordability on those properties. Is that something that you can do for next meeting? Thank you very much. Thank you all for staying this late. Appreciate it. And thank you for the people on Channel 3 for staying as well. And Rosie. Thank you, Rosie, and Mr. Jameson. Thank you. I'm thanking everybody. I didn't thank you?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, I'm thanking you for granted.